Good. Good morning, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order. Today is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. It is 9 a.m. All council members are present, including town manager, town clerk, town attorney. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Our first item on the agenda is our Charter Review Commission discussion, or review process. Nancy?
Thank you, Mayor. So this item is coming to you because basically your charter requires that every 10 years you take a look at your charter to see if any updates are needed based on changes in Florida law or based on policy concerns that you feel should be reviewed or altered. Your charter is primarily your constitution of how the town of Fort Myers Beach operates. The language in it, if you've had the opportunity to look through it, just like the U.S. Constitution, is very broad and very general, allowing it to stand for at least a 10-year period before you go back and revise it. Before, your charter provides for the creation of a committee to review the various components of it. Generally, that committee would then come to you and provide you with recommendations. You would review those recommendations on whether or not the charter should be changed. Then there's a process that needs to take place concerning adoption of an ordinance, and then ultimately, the charter change needs to be placed on the ballot. And the next ballot that would be available for any possible changes would be the November 3rd of 2026. So the town clerk has advised, and I agree with her, that we probably should get started on this process through the appointment of individuals to serve on this committee. There are some intermediate deadlines that we would have to adhere to as well, and we wanted to bring this item to you today to make you aware of it and to hopefully get some direction on the formation of this committee. I'm going to defer to our town clerk, who has probably a little bit more historical information about how the last charter review process worked, and she's worked very hard on this agenda item as well.
Take it away, Amy.
Well, I wasn't part of the last charter review, so I'm
10 years
recapping what I maybe remember. Once the committee was formed, it also includes, the town attorney was part of it, the town clerk was part of it. They met, I wanna say monthly for a while, and then maybe every 2 weeks as the deadlines started to approach a little bit, closer. And they basically took the charter document and went word by word, line by line, and came up with their recommendations, so, and update council as they got to a main point of it.
How many people were on the committee?
5, plus the attorney, the clerk.
So basically,
Well, it's 5 people you appoint.
okay.
Yeah, it's not.
Is it
council.
applications or
Yeah, what's the
It's
process?
however you choose us. There's no clear direction in,
how was it done last time? Do you remember?
I don't.
She-
I was barely
wasn't
started with the,
Other places I've been, it's just, you just brought your appointment and made a recommendation in a meeting, and then put it on the agenda and it was approved. Wasn't an
Yeah.
application
Wouldn't it
process.
make sense to follow the same
Yeah.
for any other committee that we
Yes,
have?
and
Pretty sure
they,
I did.
To
Yeah,
applications
put in an
and,
application for
And
it.
as Amy mentioned, they will go through it line by line. Their meetings are subject to the sunshine, so you would be able to monitor their progress. I think historically, the last charter review committee had 9 meetings. But ultimately, whatever recommendations they make would come to you And then, should you decide that they merit a change in your charter, we have to go through the ordinance process. So that's 2 additional public hearings. So you will have input at that level, as well as if you want to listen in on any meetings that the charter review has.
Who were the last members of the committee?
I'll find out for you, just
Okay.
give me a few moments.
But of course,
good.
doesn't it still it has to go to ballot, right, referendum?
Yes, ultimately, once the ordinance is passed, if you want to make changes,
Right.
we create a very short question that goes on the ballot, and it has to be very clear as to what the ask is to change. And then it's a yes or no vote by the electorate.
Do we have any idea at this point, I mean, how out of date or how many things would have to be changed, or is there any, I mean, off the top of our head, do we know of like certain things that have to be done?
When I looked at it, nothing really jumped out. But, I mean, this is the core of the way the town operates.
Right.
So it always does merit just a kind of a comprehensive overall view. A lot of cities have had things in there like land use approvals, height, which really should not be in there. And those things have come out.
Okay.
Wade Vos in our firm has a niche expertise in this area, and he's quite often hired by other jurisdictions as well as counties to provide a charter review overview, work with their committee.
Okay.
So we have expertise as far as, possible changes, but there's nothing that I saw that immediately caused me concern.
I have,
Just a couple questions, just clarifying questions. So there were 5 people last time, and forgive me, did you say that the town clerk and the town attorney were members and part of the 5, or were the ex officio members?
They're ex officio. There is staff to try to guide the discussion and the comments that are made.
Okay.
there
And are
was,
these meetings, are they like this, are they advertised?
And
You can watch
Yes.
them live, that kind
Yes.
of, okay.
I have the members, if you're ready.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was also a council liaison assigned to the charter review. It was Tom Babcock, Miffy Greer, Dan Hughes, Jay Light, and Dan Parker.
Liaison.
The liaison was Rexanne Hausafras. So,
So I think, and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking for direction to go ahead and perhaps initiate the process to solicit interest and then ultimately bring that back to you for appointments.
I'm in favor of following the same process we do for the committees. You put out there, this is essentially another committee. People can put in their application
The
and,
short-term committee.
yeah, short-term committee, and then the applications come to us. We select the 5 and,
are you going to put any criteria on,
Be a resident.
obviously you have to be a resident, yeah.
I would say the same as the
The
LPA.
LPA and audit committee.
Yeah. LPA and audit, yep.
Since it is subject to sunshine, just like
Yep.
they
All
are.
the others,
Yeah.
yes.
okay? And the goal would be to have hopefully an ordinance passed, the changes, all the recommendations, and the ordinance passed before you go on summer break, so by June of '26. Because August is our deadline to get on the ballot for the November election.
Okay.
I think it would be preferred to have a full-time resident as well. I mean, sometimes people are residents, but they're not necessarily here
Yeah.
full-time.
So you had said at the beginning, that the next ballot's November 3rd of 26. Did you mean 25?
No,
26.
26.
26,
So we
that's
have to
our
do it
next
now.
election. So
Yeah.
we need to start thinking about this
It's gotta
now
be on the
and
ballot by June.
getting it moving,
Next-
This
because
June to be on,
next June.
okay, next June.
Oh,
okay.
wait, the
sorry.
committee, we
Yeah,
don't know
June
how
of
long the
26.
committee's going to
Okay,
meet
gotcha.
for,
The sooner the better, essentially.
and it's by ordinance, so there's a month right there.
Okay.
So when do you want to have the when do you want the closing period for people that would like to be part of the committee.
It's at the will of the council. When you tell me, that's when we'll close it.
Oh, we're in
We're not in a
March,
huge
April,
rush right now, so.
May 15th?
Yeah, I would think if we could get it done before the July
Yeah.
break,
Okay.
to have that would be, would give them a year
For
essentially. to-
appointment in June.
Right, that would give them a year to be able to complete the process.
Yeah.
So we have a council meeting on May 5th and on May 19th. So if we put a deadline in of May 9th, could that give us time to look at everything and then vote on it on May 19th? Or does it have to be advertised more than that
There's no requirement.
for the appointments? So if we could,
I'd say shoot for the first meeting in June for appointments.
so that would be June 2nd,
That works for
Correct.
me.
okay?
So we'll
Yeah.
put a deadline in of,
I still think May 15th.
okay,
or 16th, it's a Friday. And then that gives 2 weeks before we actually have the meeting, for the appointments.
okay.
You good with that?
Yeah, I think that's great. Just another suggestion, just so there's no confusion, I would suggest that we put in the notice, both Amy and Nancy, that we, since a lot of our talent currently serve on a town advisory committee now, and many of those folks are year-round, that we just make it clear that if you are currently on a town advisory committee, you're not prohibited from serving at all. I just think, because I think we're gonna draw some of our best talent from somebody who serves on an advisory committee. Although, if you don't, that's fine too. I don't wanna discourage people who serve on an advisory committee feeling like, oh, I'm already on a committee, I probably shouldn't apply. I think we should make sure they're very welcome to apply if they're even if they're currently serving on an advisory committee.
Were there any changes last time?
If memory serves me, there was like 13 or, there was a lot of changes in the last
Yeah,
election.
there were.
Or the last time the charter came up.
I remember when Dan and I were first elected, on the ballot, that cycle was the extension of the terms from 3 to 4 years, as well as changing the election cycle from the spring to the fall.
2 big ones,
There were two big ones, yeah.
2 huge ones.
Yeah. And I don't know if those are a result of the Charter Review Committee, or if those were just done, I think those were done on their own, weren't
They
they?
were done.
Yeah, I
Those,
think so.
I
don't
think
think
they
those
were
are
part of the charter review. I'm not sure.
I think it was an amendment. I don't remember, because those were the only two referendums.
Yeah, and I don't think they were part of the Charter Review, Dan, but
I
I
don't
can't
think they
remember
were.
either, yeah.
So in here it says charter review, the charter review commission shall be appointed at least 6 months before the next scheduled election and complete its work and present any recommendations to the council for change no later than 60 days before the election, which gives you the time to get, but if you gotta get it on a ballot.
But I was gonna
though,
say, we have an
it takes
August
too much time
deadline.
to get it on a ballot.
Yeah,
So that right there, something's gotta change.
Yeah.
yeah.
So that gives them 12 months, basically, to do the audit review, and then in time to get it on the ballot.
Well, essentially 10 months, because it takes them a
Well,
month to go through the approval.
Yeah,
process.
that's true, 10 months, which is plenty of time.
And did you say there was a they have to have a minimum so many meetings, or
No,
No.
so there's no,
No.
they
No,
just,
there's no requirement. And
Okay.
again, the language in your charter right now is pretty broad still. I mean, it's not telling you the qualifications and things like that. And the language in your charter should be broad so that it's lasts a long time, that you don't have to go
It's
back
nimble.
and change. Yeah, because if it's so specific, you never know what's gonna come up.
And they'd have to have at least one meeting.
Yes,
Gotta be a minimum,
yes.
no maximum.
all right? Anybody else have any input? You good, Nancy?
Yeah, I'm fine. Amy,
Understand?
any
I'm-
questions?
good.
Okay.
That was easy enough. All right, the next item is proposed ordinance, payment of fees, charges for review prior to issuance of permits.
So the next two items are two ordinances that were discussed initially by the LPA. They wanted us to take a look at it and draft an ordinance. And typically, we don't draft ordinances other than by direction from you. However, because your meeting, we would have brought these to you on the 6th of March, but because we rescheduled the meeting, you all are meeting on the 13th, and the LPA had their meeting on the 11th. So we did go ahead and present them to them so that you would have the benefit of their input right off at the get-go, as you review these two ordinances. And the first one is, Mayor, do you want to just read the proposed title, or do you want
Sure.
me to read it?
I
So
can if
everyone
you'd like.
knows what we're talking about.
All right, let me go.
It's page
It is
18.
it's a discussion of a draft ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, suggested by the Land Planning Agency to amend section 34-53 of chapter 34, article 2, division 1 of the Land Development Code regarding acceptance of payment of fees and charges for review of any application or issuance of a permit, including inspections, until all fees and charges due to the town, including but not limited to expenditures for noticing, advertising, additional professional services, outstanding utility bills, or code enforcement fines or liens have been paid and the property is in compliance with all applicable town codes and ordinances unless review of the application is needed for safety purposes or for compliance with the town codes and ordinances, providing for severability, codification, scrivener's errors, conflicts of law, and providing an effective date.
Should it be local planning agency or land planning?
Should be.
Yeah, local. So the concern that the LPA came up with was the fact that they were seeing applications when there were known monies that were owed to the town. And so they had a discussion, and we came back with the proposed ordinance that is very, very broad. And I just wanted to focus on two policy questions that we would need your direction for. The idea of not having any type of indebtedness to the town, before you come to the town and ask for something else. The two areas where there's primarily an ask is for a land use approval, which I always like to characterize that as some type of approval for a horizontal development, or a building permit, and again, characterizing that as something for a vertical development or construction. So if an individual comes to you and has an indebtedness that they owe to the town, do you want to have as kind of a gate requiring the payment of any monies that are owed before they're able to get any type of land use approval or any type of building permit through that process? That's the first policy question. The next policy question deals with, well, what kind of indebtedness? Because there's a whole variety that we listed as far as a parking ticket on one extreme, and the other extreme would be a lien based on code enforcement or based on some kind of special exception that you did, that you imposed that was not paid. So that's kind of the two policy questions that are embedded in this particular ordinance, and,
Nancy?
yes, sir.
Just a real quick question, and I'm sure you've thought through this, but I just have to ask it. I love the concept that's before us. I'm just curious, do you have any due process exposure issues for the town legally if we enact something like this?
No, I mean, other communities do it as a requirement. When you do a submittal for a particular type of application, I do have a little bit of concern regarding building permits. My recommendation would be, should you want to do this, that you limit it to land use approvals. And the reason for that is because land use approvals is the very first door that a developer has to go through. Once you get your approvals there, then down the road, you're gonna get your development order and your building permit. So stopping it later in the process doesn't really make sense. My other concern would be the fact that the building permit process is governed by Florida statutes, and I don't wanna run into any type of preemption issue. I have looked, I think you could do it, but why take the risk if you can accomplish the same thing by making this requirement at earlier in the process?
I think that makes great sense. I just want to avoid any litigate, whether it's substantial or not, I just want to avoid any litigation exposure for the town. But again, I love the concept,
Yeah.
but I think your suggestions are good ones.
Well, and I think I mentioned it at the LPA. I mean, we have templates that we use for our ordinances, and there is a template that has been in circulation from way back in the town, and sometimes people use that one, and, you know, it's legally sufficient, and I pass it. But sometimes there is a specific whereas clause, whereas all advertising and consulting payments have been made, you know, as part of the whereas clauses. So I think the town has actually required it in the past, but I don't know that you actually had anything in your code that would have authorized that.
So, what about if it has not, what if it has not gone to a lien level, but there's code violations that have been issued? And maybe it's not a land use change.
Correct. Well, then you basically just have, first of all, let me back up and say, you have your notice of violation, and there's generally a time period to comply. And in the event you do not comply by that time period, then you go to the magistrate, who generally will give you another period of time to comply. And if you don't comply by that second time period, that's when the fines can begin to accrue. That is a separate process. Nobody has really asked for an approval in that example. That's a process that works itself out on its own.
What
If
about
there's-
the situation where Joe Developer has a property
Interesting
under,
name.
under an LLC, and now he's coming with a different LLC for a ask?
Well, Sarah and I have talked about, she's ready.
You knew I was gonna ask
There
that.
is some, regarding code enforcement liens and fines, there are some administrative challenges to that. Because as you are aware, if you have a code enforcement lien, it will attach not only to the property where the violation is, but also to any other properties that you own. I call it the spider. You know, it stretches to everything. So in the ontake of or the submittal of an application, are we gonna require a title search on that particular property and every other property that they own? And to take it one step further, what happens if they are a member of an LLC that owns another piece of property? Does that then also require them to make payment for that other lien on that other property because they are just a member, not an owner, an outright owner, but a member? And I'll defer to Sarah.
So this is something that Nancy and I had a discussion about, and then Judith and I had a discussion about, and I'm not sure if this would work fully, but one option would be, and Nancy brought this up, is that they could provide an affidavit of the properties that they own. You know, and along with their application, you know, I am a full or partial owner, and list the other ones. We wouldn't be required to do a property search, and we wouldn't be required to do a title search to ensure that this was correct. We would assume that they did that, and this is a small town. People usually have an idea of what other people may own, and if any of this is incorrect. So it would be on them to provide us that information, just because the work to do it would be onerous. And in the instance that they did own, they were a partial owner in a property, we would want them to say, so maybe the affidavit would be something along the lines of, I am a full or partial owner of property X and we owe no liens. Property Y, there are liens, or we are in code compliance. Or we would ask that they give us that information, And if they give us that information up front, you know, sometimes it's a pretty long wait for them to get fully through the process if they need to get all of their information together and go through the process with town staff and then get to you guys. And that would sort of give them the encouragement to resolve these issues so that when you get that application in front of you, you can say, well, it looks like you're also partial owner of property Y and that you were in code compliance back in November. Has this been resolved? It would not be part of the decision-making, per se, but it would be, you know, it would give you an indication of if they were a good actor and if they were honest in the community. So not part of your decision-making criteria, but maybe a good indication of how they act in the community, and it would encourage them to resolve these issues prior to coming to you.
I don't know that I'm comfortable with relying on a bad actor's honor.
Yeah.
It's just the idea of doing
Bingo.
the actual title
Yeah,
search
I mean,
for all the properties.
if we're relying
is
on bad
problematic.
repeated bad actors to tell us the truth,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be bad actors. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know that, I'd hate to waste more staff time on someone that is not gonna lie to you and waste everybody's time anyway.
Well, what would if we were to be required to do property searches or title searches, what would that entail? Is that at all reasonable?
It's not only the financial,
costly,
but it's also a
cumbersome,
delay, perhaps unnecessarily. So, I mean, my thought process, my recommendation would be that if you are going to move forward with this, that it only be the property that is the subject matter of the application that's in front of you, and not
But that's not-
expand it out.
Wouldn't that be consistent with the lien process then as well? I mean, like we had to go through before, someone that was a bad actor, had other properties on the island that were in the same LLC and it attached to all of their properties that were within that umbrella, not just the one. So this would be consistent with that process essentially?
I think my recommendation is a little narrower, that only if the violation occurred on that property. And I do want to point out that there are two exceptions that are embedded in this proposed ordinance. The first is if the application is needed to address a safety concern. And that might be in the case of, a demolition or something, that they have to get that permit because it needs to come down. And the other is for compliance with the code. So they may have a lien, a lien for a violation on the code, and in order to fix it, they need to get a special exception. Are you then going to require that payment of that lien before they get the special exception? Or are you going to allow the special exception to move forward with the understanding that that lien is still out there? And again, there is a existing collection process for your code enforcement liens.
So how does this whole process work? Say you're running an illegal parking lot and you want to change the use on one of your rental spaces within your building. Would this be part of that you would have to come into compliance or pay your liens for the illegal parking lot to be able to say change what was a restaurant to a dentist office, or a dentist office that now wants to be a restaurant?
So the application that's being requested is not to fix the violation of the illegal parking lot, right? The application is to do something else.
But it all is on the same property.
It is on the same property, correct. So in that situation, I think that this would prohibit moving forward on that.
So what about when they own two different properties and they wanna change something on the property that does not have any code violations against it, everything, but again, they're owned
The same people.
by the same people?
They could move forward without any payment in that situation, based on my recommendation. Only the subject property only the property that is the subject of the application that's being requested.
And I don't know how much this has happened, but I've heard of it happening in the past where someone had bought a property on the residential property on the island, didn't know that there were outstanding fines. There was no liens, but there were outstanding fines with the town. And then the new owner got stuck with all these fines and had to remove structures from their property because that's how they had to come into compliance.
Right.
How can we, is there a way we can address?
That's kind of a buyer beware.
So that, this wouldn't address any of that, it still would be, do your own due diligence.
Well, I think it would require the payment of those fines, because those fines are an indebtedness to the town at the time.
But it would be by the new owner, not
Correct.
by the old.
Correct.
That's shady. Well, John, you're awful quiet over there, what do you got to say?
Not much.
So your suggestion, Nancy, is to not tie it to building permits per se, but
Just to land use
Just to
approvals.
land use.
Because again, that's the beginning of the process. And two, because building permits are highly regulated by state statute, and we don't wanna run afoul of any of that.
and then, so what I had asked earlier, would that cover, when you're saying land use, would that would include a special exception if you wanted to
Yes.
change a use
Yes.
within that land? I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, variances, rezonings,
Special
development
exceptions.
agreements.
Deviations, anything?
Yeah, Sarah, what am I leaving out? I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah.
Those
Scott?
quasi judicial things that we do.
You okay with that,
Yeah.
Karen?
No, but we have to go with, I mean, it's the better than what it is now.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
I was wondering about the whole permit thing, because I know we've had that issue before. People are like, well, that person's in violation, they owe hundreds of thousands to the town, how are they getting a permit for a fence?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
We've all heard those emails.
Yep.
Jim, you okay with it?
I like it as amended by the town council. I'm sorry, the town attorney, yep.
Recommended.
Or recommended? Yep.
Recommended.
John?
Good.
All right.
Okay, so the second policy question that we would like some direction on, and the LPA had a debate about this. The items that are identified is quite broad, and that was intentional on our part. A few of the LPA members wanted to make it more specific and shorter, but others wanted to keep it broad. And the example is the parking ticket. So if I need to have my property rezoned and I owe money on a parking ticket, this would require me to pay for that parking ticket before I can continue through the process.
I mean, I don't see this being a game changer one way or another. If you're looking to redevelop your property, a $77 parking ticket's probably not gonna
Yeah.
stop you. So having it in there is not gonna be,
Well, and then
The
it would
end
be
all, yeah.
beneficial to the town, because then we have a
Sure.
collection
Yep.
situation.
I think it should be.
I'm okay with the broadness.
Okay.
Scott?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
John?
Certainly.
There you go.
Okay, so I have direction to go ahead and move forward with the ordinance, making those changes. This will come back to you. It'll go back to the LPA for additional discussion and recommendation. And then it'll come to you, sitting as town council for a proposed ordinance, 2 readings, and an adoption hearing.
Okay.
The next ordinance, draft ordinance before you, Mayor, if you want to go ahead
Sure.
and read it.
It is a discussion of a draft ordinance of the town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending Land Development Code Section 34-236 related to notices suggested by the local planning agency.
I think, Sarah, you were going to handle this one?
Sure. So the idea is, that the time that it takes staff, and the complaints that we've heard, that people are not receiving our, mailers, we thought that it may make more sense for this to be handled by applicants. The way this is currently written, that would only apply to applicants doing, CPDs, rezonings, the larger cases. This wouldn't apply to variances and special exceptions. And that would save staff a lot of time, that is not currently fully covered. Right now, the fee basically covers the printing and the actual postage for the mailers. Other communities do require similar things, that the property owner who is requesting the development and has to do notification, they have to do it themselves. Then they provide the town with affidavit and a list of the people who receive or who were sent the mailers. Another thing that has been discussed is the signage that needs to be put up. Some communities require large signs. You've probably seen it down in Collier County, over in City of Fort Myers. They require larger signs to be printed. We wouldn't be requiring that. We would just be requiring that they pick up a sign, the signs that we provide, they write out the information on it, and they put it on the site. And then they can provide us with an affidavit that it's been done, a picture of it. It would be a fairly simple process. We would ask that special exception and variance property owners do the signage. We could do the mailings for them, but we would ask that they do the signage themselves unless they're out of town, and then they can reach out to us. You know, if they don't have anybody working for them and they live out of town, we don't have a problem handling that, but it would take something off of staff's plate that is currently, has been an issue. So we wanted to see what you thought about this, if you thought this was a reasonable approach, if you had any concerns, questions, etc.
I think it's super reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, most people have someone hired anyway, whether it be a developer or attorney or whatever, that could provide the background for all of this, and then the affidavit.
I mean, the people complaining
yeah.
about mail, I mean, I just got a Christmas card
Yeah,
that was mailed in
Yeah, well,
person
Pony
sent me.
Express. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So would we be providing them the circumference, the 500-foot circumference, or is that on them to provide an affidavit to say,
That's
here's
on,
who we mailed to?
That's on them, and they actually don't get that from us as it is.
Okay.
We get that from Lee County, or in the past, we required them to give us the list of labels. So most of the applicants are still sending us, because it is in our code, that hasn't been updated. So most of them are still going to Lee County, getting the GIS document and including it in their packet, which is the list of all the names.
list of all the names,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is already information that's very easily accessible. And if anybody has problems, questions, they're more than welcome to reach out to us and we will assist them. Also, there are companies who do this type of work. So if it is kind of a small mom and pop operation that is doing a CPD and they don't have somebody, they can hire somebody to do it.
Is it safe to say that this process update would speed up the process, maybe just even a little bit, because it's not taking more staff time?
It wouldn't necessarily speed up the process. There isn't a lot of those of us who are working on the staff reports and working on the back and forth with the applicant aren't necessarily doing the printing. But it would save staff time that could be dedicated to other things that need to get done.
I thought I heard you, I'm sorry. No. I thought I heard you say that sometimes the applicant would send them out and sometimes staff would send them out? Help, is that correct?
So for the larger cases, the CPDs, the rezonings, I think it might say DRIs right now. That's not necessarily applicable, but the larger cases, they would send them out. But for the smaller cases, like the rezonings, not the rezonings, the variances and the special exceptions, we could do that because we realize that in a lot of instances they don't have anybody hired. You know, they may be doing it themselves, and it is something that we could handle. We could also still put that on them. We just recognize that it may be something that's a little bit out of some people's wheelhouse, and it might cause some discomfort or confusion. And we're not trying to add to that. We're just trying to take something off of our plate, especially for the larger developments that, you know, we may have to send out 1,000 mailers. It's a lot of time and energy, and then we just get a lot of complaints.
Yeah, if I may add some context to that, speaking of some of the larger projects that we had, when you're sending out 1,000 cards, that's taking staff almost 3 days away from a project that they could be helping and moving on in the background. So to me, that's putting it in context. It's a very small ask, and like Sarah said, where I came from, it was always on the developer. It wasn't on the county or municipalities. We're not asking for the moon and the stars. We're just asking for a little help in the process.
Makes sense to me.
What is the line of demarcation here in terms of who has to take this on now versus who doesn't have to take it on?
So I believe the way it's written, and I didn't write this, Judith did, so she and I have had a couple conversations. At this point, it's the variances and the special exceptions that are not required to do, their own mailers, but they would be required. At this point, signs are left out of that too, but after some discussion, she and I think that the signage should be on them also unless they request it to be on us. Which we don't have a problem with if they're not in the area and they can't do it. But we would handle the mailers for the variances and the special exceptions. And then if somebody came in with a CPD, a rezoning, a RPD, a development agreement for those projects, they would be handling the signage and the mailers. But again, the signage, it's the signs that we have. We're not requiring that they hire a sign company, get them printed out, get somebody to install them. It's just our little signs that they write on. You know, they would just have to come in, fill it out, put it out there, give us an affidavit. So that's, right now, that's what CPDs, RPDs, development agreements, DRIs, rezonings.
So if you're just coming in to ask for a variance for your fence.
That's what I was just gonna go to, yeah, just
Yeah.
the fence example would give me some pause.
Yeah.
But yes, so the other, just devil's advocate here, cause it seems like a good idea. So you've got a challenge with our postal service already, and many of these, proposals are contentious. And so now you've got a dynamic now where a neutral party is sending out the notifications, and suddenly that shifts to the applicant, who obviously has a bias. And so if somebody doesn't get a postcard, even though there's an affidavit signed, it just seems like it potentially puts some additional gasoline on the fire for folks to say, you know, they never sent me a postcard, those bums. I mean, they're
Or
just
they
out
got
there.
it the day before.
Yeah, they're just out to make money, and they stuck it to us and never notified us. And obviously, you do have the affidavit, but it just seems like it potentially adds volatility to an already volatile situation. I'm what's your thought on that?
So if that is a concern, other communities that I've worked in have required certified mail. That way you have a record of when it went out, but you know if somebody received it, you get it back if they didn't. So that is one way to do it, and I've worked in communities where you have to give them an affidavit and then you have to give them all the slips. So
That's really interesting, yeah. I
yeah,
just wonder what
it does add a layer of difficulty though.
yeah, and cost,
So-
I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it make more sense to increase the amount of time they have to send that out? So, a lot of people will wait till that deadline just for that reason, in other communities, I'm guessing.
Well, and in some instances, it's difficult to send it out too much before that because we're working back and forth. They're trying to get on an agenda date, and we can't verify that they can make it on the agenda date until they've gotten us all the documents, until we make sure that it's really ready. So I would agree, except in some instances, that's gonna push them off to the next meeting, or they may send out mailers that aren't accurate, and then they have to resend them if they end up on the next meeting. So it is a kind of a tight schedule. Right now, we're sending them out about 10 days in advance, and we're being told that people aren't getting them.
Could we make it a certified is preferred but not required?
Well, but
Not everybody's gonna probably do it anyway.
yeah, well, I mean, it still goes to Mr. Adderholt's concern that, on those contentious cases, they might say, no, we didn't do certified, and they didn't have to do certified, but
I see what you're
then everybody feels like, well, now you're being really sneaky, you could have done certified to prove.
That's true. That's
So, yeah, I don't know.
It is kind of only way that you can keep them checked is by requiring the certified mail, if you were going to go that route. Because now you're making them take that extra step and, lack of a better term, certify that they sent it out to the.
What kind of costs are we talking about?
Yeah, that was my question.
I could not tell you. I can't recall. I mean, I have done the certified mailers, like sticking them on the envelopes
Yeah.
and, for an engineering firm. So I
just
don't
wonder
recall.
with
I think it's like $7 or $8.
I hate to use the word transiency of this island, but there's a lot of folks that come and go and don't, are just here part-time, and I wonder if that certified mail thing would alleviate some of the challenges we've had in the past of making sure people, at least we make a good attempt to get them the information. I'd have to do a little research on certified mail to see how much.
Okay,
The cost of certified mail is $4.85.
I just,
Ooh,
yep, I
that's
just looked it up.
ridiculous. We,
Yeah.
that's, come on.
But if
Yeah,
you want
plus-
the- but if you
plus-
want the
plus
return
the
thing,
cost
that's
to the
extra.
post
However,
office.
That the
however,
people that don't
staff-
get the mail, it's like you live on an island that just got whacked by 3 hurricanes. You really think the mail? I mean, everyone that lives on this island knows that the mail is not reliable.
Right.
So that this excuse that I didn't get the flyer. Come on.
Staff time, probably equal that amount as well. If you think of the hourly rate that 6 or 7 people are working on that to do, it's gonna
And you'd
equal
bill,
that
and
as
you'd
well.
bill the applicant for that, obviously. So
That is
they're gonna
correct.
pay one way
They're
or
gonna
the
pay
other.
one way or the other.
That's interesting, okay.
Well, as of now, I don't think
We
we
don't
bill
do
for the
certified.
hours. Yeah, right now,
Right.
we don't.
We
But
don't
if
now.
we did, that's the cost that the town is currently bearing.
I think it's fair to bill for that, yeah. But again, I'm sorry, I got mixed signals from Scott and Dan. Did you think the certified mail was a good idea or a bad idea?
Bad idea. I'm sorry, Jim.
No, no, I don't
it's-
care, I'm
it's
just
too-
talking.
we
That's why we're here having a
Yeah,
discussion.
we shouldn't.
There is a cheaper way to send certified mail. You head to the post office, select certified mail as an option for your letter, and it goes down to $3.35.
Yeah, well,
I can just see someone
just
sitting at one of
saying.
those machines for 1, 2.
Yeah.
That's
you know,
not
for-
government
well,
life, Jim.
Well, for me, it's
We're not joking.
if it was solving a problem, but because they're sending it certified isn't gonna solve the problem.
No.
It's not gonna take away, I didn't get it. It's
Right.
not gonna take away the person that wasn't at the mailbox that day, even though it was sent
Yeah,
certified.
no, I'm not advocating for it, I'm just,
Yeah.
this is why we're here, we're
Yeah.
having a discussion, I don't,
And you're getting a certified letter from a developer, and it's like, I'm not going to pick that thing up. I'm not signing up for that. What's that about?
What about
Right.
being-
Or from the town,
Yeah.
what do they want?
Yeah, I don't necessarily need.
Certified's a little
Certified.
slippery.
Yeah,
all right.
it's an undue cost, it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's a big cost.
Yeah,
If you
that
have to
would be
send out
substantial.
500.
Yeah.
at $5
But
a
I do
piece,
support
basically.
this, that they do it and
Yeah.
taking it up,
Yes.
the pressure off the staff.
I do too.
And I think that, in the instance that, somebody, say, 10 people come to the meeting and none of them got the mail, or a whole bunch of people didn't get the mail, then we might question, like, did you do this? And maybe we don't feel there was adequate. I don't know. I don't know if that's an issue though, Nancy.
Do you know, Nancy, how this affidavit process works? Do they just attest that they did the mailing, or is the post office involved in that affidavit process, or do
No,
they have to
they-
show, do they have to
the-
demonstrate something?
The way that I've seen it in other communities is that it's just an affidavit, but attached to it is the list of everybody who they are attesting that they mailed to.
Much like what we do when we put our documents together. We
Yeah.
list all the
Just
addresses.
list the addresses and the people. and
Well,
that's
you would
what
be able to
we require
verify it
from
through
them as
postmarks,
well.
wouldn't you? I mean, if they
Right.
said we sent it out on this date, and someone gets it and it was postmarked 2 days after when they said they sent it, pretty easy to prove they didn't send it on the day they said they were gonna send it. Or they said they sent
I
it.
guess it depends on the efficiency of the system too. I don't know, because I'm not,
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it would be stamped the day it's brought in, but I don't know. I mean, I know we've had a lot of issues here on the island. So, I don't know for sure.
Don't we usually reference the date of the letter versus the date of the stamp?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess the good thing is that if it is a good thing, that the more contentious items receive a lot of publicity, so generally
Correct.
people will be aware
They know anyway.
for other purposes, yeah.
And we are gonna, the signs will be happening more consistently because we're requiring that the applicant put up the signs. So, that's one way, and that they give us an affidavit showing that they've done that.
But are we, I'm glad you brought that back up. I mean, how long does it take to put a sign in? And if we're not, if we're gonna require them to do it, the only way we're gonna know if they did it is to go to the site to see if it's there anyway.
Well, I mean, usually what they do is we require that they take a picture of the sign and they give us an affidavit of that they installed the
Oh, okay.
sign.
Yeah.
But, and also, you think that it's a fast thing to get, but with the traffic the way it is, if you have to go all the other way.
Don't bring that. come
No,
on.
I'm just
It's
saying,
not on the
like,
agenda.
it does take a lot of staff time to actually get out there on some occasions, so.
Well, it's
I
easy
forgot
to,
about the affidavit part, so they would have to take a picture.
Yeah, they would have to
Yeah.
show us that at least it was
It's
up
in the
when,
ground.
and they don't have to prove, in some communities, they have to prove that the sign remained up.
Right.
We're not asking, and then somebody could come by and vandalize the site and pull out the sign, and I've had that happen on cases. You know, somebody doesn't want the case to go forward, they go out there and they pull up the sign every time a sign gets put out, and then the case gets
Yep.
delayed. So we're not requiring that. I mean, basically, we're saying we're doing our best effort, and the applicant is doing their best effort, and we have affidavits, and we're trying to get the word out, but especially for special exceptions and variances, you know, it's, all of the notification right now is a courtesy. And in the instance where they have to do, an ordinance, then it has to be in the newspaper, and that's the official notification that is required by state law.
And we've also got tablets recently that they can notify us that they put it up, and our code people can drive out and take a picture of it. It's time stamped and location stamped and everything to verify
Oh,
that they
that's
did
great.
that. So
Yeah.
that's not hard to do. Our people are all over the island, and we can just have that step, and it doesn't cost anything extra.
One more layer of proof.
So I'm gonna take this moment to point out that, in paragraph B of the proposed language changes, there is another sentence that we added requiring that the signage that's posted be in layman's language. So instead of a multifamily dwelling, that it's say apartment building. And I think that that's a pretty big step towards greater transparency as far as what's really gonna happen on that parcel.
Who's gonna make the
Fourplex.
determination of what layman means?
Fifth grade?
I don't know, Sarah, I mean, you would
And does
dwell
that, and
with
does that
them.
create an argument, since we're talking about someone coming in and arguing about something?
Common terminology?
Well, so here would be my answer. Currently, we're not required to put it in layman's terms, and in the past, it's been, applicant for blah blah address is requesting variance from section blah 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 of code. And then it says, if you have questions about this application, please call staff. And we get lots of phone calls, we get lots of emails. So right now, I mean, we have improved that, but in the past, it was very basic. It was just to fit on the
It's
postcard.
not just basic, it's unhelpful. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. So to your point, this late term attempt is certainly better than nothing,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't wanna reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, we would still want them to include staff information. So, you know, if applicants have, or if, you know, anybody who receives the notice has questions, they can still contact whoever is the staff member working on that case.
And again, that's 7 calendar days, there's no way to extend that. Because of the times of getting them on the meetings, I mean, 7 days doesn't seem, especially with the way our mailing service sometimes is lag.
I think you have discretion in that regard if you wanna make it longer.
I mean, we could aim for 10, because 10 is what we aim for now.
I would feel more comfortable, because if you put it in there, you drop it in the box on Saturday night, they're not gonna touch it till Monday. So
Yeah.
you just wasted 2 days of the
Sure.
7, but you technically drop it in there on the 7th.
Well, you're really optimistic about our postal service. That's pretty impressive, Dan.
Well, I've,
I just got a Christmas card last
Well,
week.
and some things, some offices, main office could be in Atlanta or Tallahassee
I
or
got-
somewhere by the time it
I
got
got a
down
notice to
here.
appear for jury duty 2 months ago, the day before I was supposed to report.
Oh, nice.
Luckily, I didn't have to, but,
Thank God.
yeah, I'd say there's an issue.
Yep.
Yeah, there is an issue.
Everybody okay with the 10 days?
Yep.
John?
Certainly.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
10 days.
Sure.
Little time never hurt anything.
Say
Anything
they
else,
put prisoner.
No, I'm good.
You got everything you need, Sarah? All right. Then our last item is the temporary housing discussion. Karen, I believe this is, you wanted to have this added to it? Or everybody,
Yeah.
you brought it up?
Well, we have, I think it was last year, or maybe even 16 months ago, we extended the temporary RVs or trailers, whatever, for residential to September of this year, of 2025, and saying that you know, they either need to be in permitting, they need to be able to show plans, they need to be working on building. Otherwise, they have to move. They have to get off their property. And there's a lot of questions already coming in on that, and I just thought if we can get ahead of this and decide what is gonna be realistic for this year, are we moving that end date out? Are we keeping it September of '25? Just so people know what to expect. And if we do keep it of 2025, what are those exact parameters that you're allowed to stay in place or you have to move?
Well, I guess let's start with, has anybody changed their opinion? I think it was unanimous when we said that the 3-year mark of the storm was going to be the deadline.
I thought we did that because that was what the state,
Well, that was the state, and if the state extends it, the state extends it. There's
Right.
nothing we
It
can
was
do
part
about
of
it.
I thought that was kind of my thought process was let's go with what the state
Right.
does, so.
And I haven't heard anything that they're gonna extend Senate Bill 250, but it very well, and I haven't seen anything in any of the updates from Tallahassee yet that has said they are going to
No.
extend it. There may be different wording somewhere else that's gonna be in a different bill, but
So let me ask you this, has there been, any Senate bill that was for specifically Milton instead of Ian?
not that I've, I mean, just other than the state of emergency, I don't know that they changed anything.
Didn't change
Nancy
anything.
would probably know better than
Yeah,
that.
so, in your packets, SB 250 did establish that, 3-year period. But since that, that part of SB 250 was codified in section 166.0335, and there is a copy in your packet.
I didn't see that.
What that statute
Wait,
does
there-
now,
What page is it?
I have
Yeah, I know.
page 43 of 44.
Yes.
Okay.
So what that statute
I didn't
did
see
was basically preempted local governments from prohibiting temporary residential structures from remaining in certain zoning categories after an occurrence of a storm. But it was subject to 3 criterias, that there was some type of good faith effort to rebuild or renovate, including but not limited to applying for a building permit, submitting a plan, or obtaining a construction loan. Also that whatever temporary structure was there, or shelter, be connected to water and electric utilities and without presenting any type of threat to health and human safety. And also that the resident live in the temporary structure. So it was
the
a
other one.
codification of that 3-year period. Your ordinance that was adopted, the emergency temporary placement permit, you all had only had an 18-month period.
With reviews for renewal.
Correct. And so the state basically preempted that, so now you're at 36 months. There's no prohibition on the part of the state to going beyond the 36 months. FEMA has asked that, or has requested, directed, whatever you want to call it, that you not issue any more emergency temporary placement permits. However, they didn't say anything about extending the ones that you already have in place. You did go forward by resolution and direct the town manager to revoke those permits related to containers. And I believe the town manager has done that. But those other permits that are still out there for temporary residential structures, they're still permits that appear to be in effect with the authorization to the town manager to extend those. Now, your ordinance does have some qualifications in there as far as the extension. It would be if the town manager or designee decides if a hardship exists based on evidence that's provided by the permit holder, that they've exercised all due diligence in obtaining permits, either for repair or replacement, and that other criteria might be whether the applicant has had difficulty in completing insurance claims, obtaining an architect, engineer, construction materials, or getting a loan or some other type of thing. FEMA. So again, we have three different, like, types of regulations. We talked about the state statute, that is your code. FEMA, in their last letter, to Andy, basically said, I wanna read it verbatim, that having, the question was asked, do temporary housing trailers such as recreational vehicles, park trailers, or similar need to be removed from the special flood hazard area for the town to come into compliance with the letter dated 11/21/2024? FEMA's response was, temporary housing for disaster survivors that has been permitted by the town of Fort Myers Beach is acceptable.
But read between the lines. Disaster survivors,
Right.
which goes right into this last thing at the state. The resident lives in,
In this
is it a
obstruction.
resident living there, which would be a survivor, in the words of FEMA?
Or are they
Or is
renting
it-
the lot?
Or are they renting the lot? That's the breakdown that we're seeing out there right now.
But the state statute only applies for the first 36 months.
Which is
Correct.
September of 25.
That's fine, but once you go past that,
Mm-hmm.
based on what you just read from FEMA, how are we gonna, because I will all but guarantee you, if they're still here, FEMA's gonna ask for us to prove that that's a disaster survivor living in that trailer. Or they could, based on their response. I hate to be so
No,
cynical, but it's
No, and
I know, first the
and
post office and now the FEMA. Dan, you're just a
ball of hope today.
skeptic of the federal government, Dan.
So, in order to address, I mean, we're talking very broadly, very general here. I think what we really need to do, and I defer to the town manager, is to get our arms around how many residential permits are out there, how many people fall within this category, how many people do not fall within this category, and address it on a case-by-case basis, which is what you have in your ordinance.
But, and it's also how many residential permits are out there, but also who of those residential permits are in the process of building, permitting. I mean, those people are fine. It's the ones that are sitting on empty lots with nothing going on, and we don't even know if it's the resident or not the resident.
We have a spreadsheet we're working on now for FEMA that should have all that information on it in short order, hopefully in the next few days.
Of the resident, but again, there's no way the town can tell who's living in that
That's
trailer.
correct.
There's no way. Short of knocking on the door and asking for their driver's license.
Or seeing if it's, on our new software that we're getting to see if somebody's renting it out, that's a short-term rental. I mean, that will show as soon as we get that in place.
But I think the point of this discussion, and I don't want to speak for you, Karen, but is there a time frame where we want to say there's just no more trailers on residential properties? I think that's what this
So I
discussion
think
is.
that would be a direction to the town manager to not issue any extensions.
But there are some
Unless there's
permits out there
hardship.
that
I mean,
don't
there's
have
there's
deadlines.
95 there's 90
Right.
excuse me, Dan.
Well,
There's
currently, your code says unless there's hardship.
I mean, there's 95 properties where people are waiting, for get the funds to lift their
Lift
properties.
and-
So, I mean, I would call that a hardship.
But that's an extenu, but that's covered in here. It's the same thing, like if you're building, but you're not done yet, or
Right.
you've pulled your permits, or you're working with your architect, you're doing you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
So that's that extenuating circumstance, hardship, whatever. But it's, again, I think we leave the date and we deal with the exceptions or the people that have done nothing to come into compliance.
And there are a number of empty lots where you have a trailer, and no one has been there in months. The
Right.
trailer's there, it's
Right.
hooked up like we requested to electricity and to sewer,
But it's just sitting
but
there.
it's just sitting there.
Yeah,
And it hasn't been used, it hasn't been habitated. are they coming down on vacation and using it because they have the property?
We've all gotten emails that have,
You know,
from,
and-
from
and-
residents that are complaining about that. They're setting up a camper.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're going back up north for the summer. In the winter, they're coming down and they're
Right.
using the trailer with no intentions of
Exactly.
building anything on
Yeah.
that lot.
I've seen one set up in the last 6 weeks or so that it follows that same logic.
Yeah.
And there's so many permits that have been issued over the last, temporary permits that have been issued. Some have end dates on them, renewal dates, some don't. I know for sure two that I've talked to, that their permit is open-ended, it doesn't have an end date. So the renewal, how do you, they don't know when their renewal has to be, their permit doesn't have an end date. How do you reset the clock, right? How do you,
We can reach out to the people that were issued a temp use permit. We can run that data. We can go down that list. We can use, the code department to go out and verify that these are sitting on an empty lot, trailers, whatnot. We can deduce all that and break it down and reach out to those people and find out which ones are open-ended and which ones would have to come for renewal. We could set that, we could create the metric.
I would think, Dan, that anybody with a temporary use permit and it's open-ended, it's not temporary. So,
my point exactly.
Yeah.
But it says on their temporary use permit, but
Right.
there's no end date on
No
it.
end date.
I've
yeah.
seen two of them personally that don't have end
I,
dates.
I
on them.
believe you.
So it's
but-
like, how do you?
But if you say, hey, look, the end date's this date, they can't say, well, it was open-ended. Then that's not the definition of temporary.
I'm okay with the end date that we've all talked
Yeah.
about and agreed upon. I have no issues with that. But what happens on that date? I don't think it's fair to staff to say, someone could come in and plead their case that, we're just about to submit our permit to build our house, but it's the 28th now and we're not gonna be able to submit it for another month. We need a little bit more time. It's, to me, it puts undue burden on staff, because now someone can say, staff, I'm just gonna use Frankie, cause he's looking at me, but Frankie gave me an extension, but he didn't give this, or I didn't get an extension, but he gave that one, and I have the same circumstance. Do we want, how many are left out there? That would be good data to have. How
Yeah.
many are still left out there? If we're only talking a few,
But this is why,
the policy decision should
yeah,
come before
but this is
council.
why I'm bringing it up in March. We are 6 months ahead of this.
Right.
Get your act together. If you're gonna be applying, get going, because the
Yes.
end date is September 30th, 2025.
Right, and you know what's gonna happen on the 29th.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a stampede of people coming in here and saying, oh, here you go.
Well, you know what, I've said it many times, is the further we get away from that storm, the decisions are gonna be harder, people are not gonna like them, things are gonna have to happen that nobody wants to do, but
Yep.
you've had enough time, right? You've had enough time to try to make some progress. Now, there are things, like you said, Scott, there's
FEMA.
50-some properties that are waiting for, are those people even staying on their properties? We don't know. I think having the data to be able to make that decision would be very helpful. Here's how many permits we know are out there. Now, it may mean there's some that don't have permits, that's a whole code enforcement thing, but now you can look at those, are they making, which ones have permits in place, which ones don't? And narrow it down to the ones that we know, which is probably not a whole lot, that are living in trailers that have absolutely no plans of doing anything.
But I guarantee you there are some.
But then I think as a council, you can make that policy decision and say, here's the ones that need to, need to come in and explain their case, or here's the ones that shouldn't be getting another permit.
Yeah,
It takes the onus off of one person or two people.
Correct.
Right.
A staff member, that way if they've got problems, they come to us five.
I think we're still far enough away from the date where we could even issue a courtesy letter to those properties that we do discern as, hey, questionable.
Right.
Saying, hey, what exactly are your plans?
Yeah.
There's
What are your
reminder.
intentions?
Exactly. But I think that gives us enough time to collect all that data and at least come up with a plan A and B for you to present.
John?
Mm-hmm. I'm good on all this.
Are you okay with that, Karen? We'll get the
Yeah.
data back to us so that we can
Makes
see how many are
sense.
out there.
See
I
what kind of
mean,
numbers we're
Yep.
talking about.
Yeah, I just want, I didn't want this to happen in August. That's why I brought it up now. We've got 6 months, people have 6 months, know that this is coming. And,
and people have heard, I think when we said it a year ago, that September is gonna be the deadline, even commercial properties have heard it.
right,
Yeah, and actually, on the commercial side, they like that there's a definite end date so they can make plans. It's when stuff's up in the air, You
Right.
know, they just keep rolling with it, so
Right.
I think a lot of times if you do give a deadline, it will,
And-
Cause
and
action.
To that point, when you brought that up, council brought that up, about making sure that people understood that this wasn't going to be going on forever. We have only had one business that was in a temp situation come forward and go through that process. Currently in that process, close to getting out of there, so. Sometimes it takes, to kick the can down the road a few times to
Well,
get moving.
people are getting tired of the can getting kicked.
Yeah.
You know, it's
It's
not
time.
just trailers, it's derelict
Right.
properties, it's, you know, properties that are torn down, but now they're not cleaning up their, and it's not just the Estero Boulevard, it's the side streets.
Yeah.
We'll bring this up later, but. Nancy, what do you think?
I think that, just the direction that you're giving to the town manager and staff, I think that's adequate at this time, knowing that we're doing it before the deadline. I like the idea of the courtesy notice, but I think the town is in control of establishing that deadline. But for the state statute, they only had 18 months, and then they would have had to come and ask for the extension. So now they had 36 months, and now they need to come and ask for an extension based on the, the circumstances.
Well, in all fairness, that 18 months, when we were sitting at the, we didn't know what we didn't know. I mean, we're
Right.
a month and a half after a storm,
Right.
18 months seemed like a really long
Long
time.
time.
Until 13 months
That's
later, you
true.
still can barely see Estero Boulevard because
Right.
the sand is on it, but, so 18 months was kind of just a pick a number because you didn't know. Now we know 18 months goes by very fast. All right, so you're gonna bring it back at a council meeting then, or would it be next month's M&P, how, the data to bring it back so that we can review the data, give direction as to, but I
Sooner
think
the-
we're all in
Sooner
agreement.
the better.
John, you in agreement with the September 30th deadline,
it
regardless
done.
of what comes out of that?
Yeah, sooner the better.
Jim,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Scott,
yes.
okay?
Could we
So-
have the data by the April 7th town council meeting?
We'll work to get that done, yes.
Because I do think, I mean, me personally, I think it should be at a town council meeting. It gets a lot more
Yes.
visibility then, and it makes it more concrete.
Well, that'd give an opportunity for people that maybe are in this situation to come up in public comment and give their
Exactly.
2 cents on something that maybe we didn't think of,
Exactly.
or a situation that's out there that we maybe didn't think of.
Yep.
So can I just have clarity that this is only for permits that have been issued? This is for extensions, not for the granting of any new permits, is that correct?
Yeah, we haven't changed that.
Well, we're not
Right,
issuing permits.
We are not issuing any
Right.
permits, so if you do not have a permit, this isn't really gonna help you, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. But if you do have a permit and you need more time, and there's extenuating circumstances, hardship, you can get an extension, a
Well,
reasonable.
you might be able.
You might be able to,
Yeah,
yes.
you can, you
It's not
might be
automatic,
able.
correct.
There's an avenue.
Right.
All right. Got it, Andy?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's see.
I think that was the
I
last
think
one.
that was the last one, which brings us to agenda management.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Before we get to agenda management, I just happened to be looking at my town phone, and I just got an advisory from the town, saying Estero Boulevard will be closed from Santini Plaza to 175 Sterling Avenue for the Women's Club St. Patrick's Day Parade on Saturday, this coming Saturday, which is great. But I just wanted to wrestle with this thought here. Then the next sentence is, the road will be closed from 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. I'm wondering, are we literally closing Estero from 7:30 to 11:30 a.m.? And because the parade lineup, they want the floats there by 8. So if folks are they wouldn't even be able to get to Santini Plaza with their floats, right? I'm
I
just,
think that would be.
Advisory just went
Yeah, I would think we should double check with LCSO. They're the ones that are controlling that road being shut off.
yeah, and we'd want to change that advisory. The parade starts at 10, so I mean, having the road closed during the parade certainly makes sense, and maybe just a little before, but that's a lot of time before the parade starts, so I just. we
Well,
didn't
and
wanna-
is it just closed between those two places?
Well, if
Or-
if it's closed between those two places, then the whole Estero Boulevard is in essence shut down, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so it's,
Well,
Well,
the
unless you live
Times
on-
Square could still be open.
no, that's true. But if you're trying to go north
If
to
you-
south or south to
Right,
north,
you
you're
can't get
stuck,
through.
yeah.
You can't get through.
Yeah, and I think I don't even think they would want that. I don't wanna speak for the women's club, but I can't imagine they'd wanna shut that road down at 7:30 AM when the lineup, they're supposed to get the floats there by 8.
That may be just what they put in their application as hours of operation, but that might not be when the road is actually closed.
Correct.
LCSO would, I
We'll
think,
follow
will be
up
able to
with
clear
that.
that
Yeah,
up.
I would hope that's where we got that information from LCSO. but
I just
we'll
don't want the
follow up.
poor sheriff's office to be there at 7:30 thinking they're doing us a favor.
I highly
and-
doubt that
yeah.
they'd wanna shut it down at 7:30.
No, they would want to, but they may think they're directed to, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, John, anything for agenda management?
I don't have anything.
Jim?
I'd mentioned this before the meeting, but I'll just say it publicly. It would be great to have FDOT come and talk about the foot of the bridge project. We've talked about this a few times, and I know it's challenging to get them here. But just give us an update,
Stuck in
on the project.
traffic. I'll pursue that on the 21st at the
Oh, that's right.
Lee County MPO.
Back
That's
on
right.
the permit, the times were what, Nicole just texted me, that's what was on their permit. So we'll follow up.
With LCSO and get the right information out.
John, you'll follow up with that because you are now in a position of authority with the
Catbird seat.
MPO, right? Are you the chairman of the MPO?
I'm this year's chair.
Could you take a second and explain what what that means and what the MPO does?
It means I run the meetings, Jim, and I would cut off debate from you, and
Because I'm so loquacious?
Yeah, you give them a softball.
But I guess my question is, the MPO controls all funding decisions for transportation projects in Lee County,
in Lee
right?
County, correct.
I'm just trying to toot your horn a little bit.
Aw,
Yeah.
And if
don't
you-
mess with my
yeah.
toot toot.
Cause it would be nice to know what the plans are for that roundabout and the moat they're building there.
Not a roundabout, but what was it, Mr. Peanut? Isn't that what we decided? it
Oval
was?
about, whatever it looks like a retention pond is all it looks like.
Pickle.
That's all I've got, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Karen?
I'm good.
I'm good.
The only thing I would like to add, if there's another council member that would like to see it, I'd like to see a formal plan from staff as to,
Do you wanna say something?
we've attacked Estero Boulevard, for lack of better terms, to come into compliance with unsafe structures, derelict properties. I'd like to see a formal plan from staff to bring to us as to the side streets, and it's not just houses that need to come down, it's properties that are 5-foot weeds that, we can go through the code enforcement process. I'd like to see that process, if it hasn't started, start, and what the plan is to be able to get that implemented, because we know how long it can take should someone not want to come into compliance.
Correct.
And
I-
decide they wanna fight the system.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, I'm
Yep,
totally in
okay.
agreement on that.
I love that idea, Mr. Mayor, but I would just wonder if we could just add on to that. It would be great for folks to, particularly in individual neighborhoods, to have some kind of a metric or something online, and maybe it is online, town staff, but where they could check on a home. There's an example on Tropical Shores Way, and we've talked a little bit about this. There's a home that has never been entered since Hurricane Ian, and it is, the person was a hoarder, and the house is full of stuff, and it is rat infested central on Fort Myers Beach. The rats are literally terrorizing the neighbors. They're eating the wires in their cars and trucks. It's the quality of life on Tropical Shores Way is grim. And I just use that as an example. I know the town's done a nice job of trying to do everything they can to put pressure on the owner of that property to do something. But it would be great if people could go on a website and say, okay, the town attorney's doing a search and it's in that process now, or hey, the search is done, but now we've noticed them and they've got X days. It would be great to have some kind of a system where people could check on a property, because I get a lot of inquiries about, hey, there's this property in my neighborhood we'd called before, and we got a nice response from the town initially, but where does it stand? Because I know it takes a while for you to do the search.
Yes.
And it'd just be nice for people to be able to look up a property and say, hey, what's the status? Is it currently being, is it?
We, early on, when we started the unsafe building process, the demolitions, we created a spreadsheet, which has been turned over to staff to do that monitoring and moving the projects forward. Our only role right now is getting title searches if we are given an address to research, so it's really been turned over.
But it takes you a while to do that search, right?
The title search does, yes.
What is that timeline at this point?
It depends on the property. I've seen 2-week turnaround, I've seen a month.
Okay. And then this information, Frankie, is there a way for the public to ever be able to access it?
We could definitely work on a way to make it accessible to the
Yeah.
public. It's public record, you know,
Yeah.
as soon as we contact those people that they're in violation, it becomes a public record.
Yeah.
So we could easily share that, and we can also incorporate, you know, we follow the greater municipal building code, type thing for unkept properties, so you can.
Right, so
You
there's.
can tie in a lot of those things into that same spreadsheet, so people could easily discern, hey, property at 123, you know, Acme Street, is currently under violation for the following, bing, 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 and the town is pursuing this.
Would they
We
know,
could do a little blurb.
would they know when they got notice that if you don't tear it down, we're gonna tear it down, and would they be able to see that timeline as well?
We can to a point, but again, you're not accounting for appeals processes, and
Yeah.
then we cannot supersede what the building official does.
That has nothing to do with the date of the notice.
That is correct. We could issue that, we could have that in there for them.
Because a lot of people will email us and ask a question, has this been violated? It's been 2.5 years, has this even gotten a violation on it?
Correct.
And to be able to see that, to the vice mayor's point,
Right.
I can look up 123 ABC Street and see that either nothing's happened with this property, which would be a shame. I would hope by now we have a list of all the properties on the island that need to be, come into compliance. But for people to be able to see that, I think would help alleviate some of the neighbors as well as staff time, not having to answer emails or us forwarding emails to you saying, what's going on with this property? I know one of for sure that, best I've been able to check, has had nothing from the town sent to it, at least that I've found. And every single one of us, it's on the busiest intersection of the, well, currently the busiest intersection on the island, that everybody drives by because they have to every time they leave the island. That, talk about rats and cars still in the garage that hasn't been touched since the storm. I can't find any information from the town as far as violation on that property, and I don't know why. And that's why I was asking, I would like to see a plan.
Okay,
of
sure.
Why, or what, you know, not necessarily, we're past the why. What are we gonna do to address these properties that haven't been addressed since the storm?
Makes sense.
That's all I have.
Sarah has something.
Hey, Sarah.
So I wanted to let you know that we are doing a community outreach opportunity this weekend at the library, the grand opening. We're going to be setting up a table. We're going to be located next to the food trucks, so in the garage, and hopefully lots of people will be coming by. We're going to have a few activities, and we're also going to be handing out flyers with a QR code so that people can take a survey that's going to be available online. Once we have the QR code, we're also going to give it to Nicole to put online for us. We are searching for other opportunities for public outreach events, so we'll hopefully have some more, and we also want to have an event once town hall gets open and have sort of an open house opportunity. We have a couple different projects that need public outreach, some that are associated with grant funding also. So that's the hope.
I know it's not the use of Code Red, but would it make sense to send information like that out through Code Red to say if you wanna participate in the comp plan discussions? I mean, not everybody goes to the library. Not everybody watches these meetings. I know that's hard to believe. You know, and not everybody
Well, the
watches
feds
Beach
are
Talk
gonna be
Radio,
watching
so
now,
it's,
Dan.
but
So
everybody
I've-
gets the Code Reds.
I've reached out
that
to
has signed up
the
for it.
PIO, and I've asked her to put it out through her normal channels.
We
did.
can, I've been in
She
other
did, yeah, we.
municipalities where we've sent it out, things like that out through Code Red, some, you know, not, you don't wanna overuse it, but use it for particular things, that can be done.
And, well, that brought up another, I mean, before the storm, where there was discussions about trying to integrate with the condo associations information, because they, before the storm, they would have boards, some had digital boards that would
Right.
say all the things that were going on. If we could revisit that, some
I know we've got a
system
lot
that
of
we could
email
put in place.
addresses for all of them, when we created, we were having those meetings with condos
Yeah,
a
they-
year ago or whatever.
For, on the condo front, there are these wonderful information boards in the condo lobbies, many of them, and they're looking for content. So if the
Perfect.
town was to supply something, they'd
All right.
post it, yeah.
And you brought up another topic. Speaking of town hall, where are we? on that?
Well.
It's blue.
It's blue.
It's blue. It's moving along. We're working with the,
By the way, lots of compliments on the way you handle the signage on the town.
Yeah. it
The,
looks
the,
really
the
good.
white signage for Town Hall, Fort Myers, it was very tastefully done. Got a
Yeah,
lot of very
very
positive
classy.
feedback
I'm,
about that.
I'm leaving a couple of decent things to remember me by. I didn't feel like we needed a monument sign that could get damaged in an accident or vandalized or anything, so to get it up high, get it where people could see, kind of make the building a billboard,
Looks great.
but make it very tasteful. I just thought that was a nice touch. I see a lot of the condos do the same thing, and that's just a way not to have to get, we got a sign permit, but we didn't want to put one. I didn't think it was any advantage to putting a monument sign out there, just defeated the purpose. We're working with the drainage, the company, Andrews, to do the stormwater on the parking lot. We're also now waiting on the permit to finalize the alarm system, and that's going through the fire department, so that, once that's done and he can put all of his wiring in, the walls go up, the drop ceiling goes in, I mean, it's a fast process at that point. That's pretty much where we are now, waiting on that. So we keep asking and keep providing information, so as soon as we get that, they're ready to go and get everything, and we can't work on that particular thing until second and third floors are complete and ready to go. We're almost, we are just so close. If it hadn't been for the actual having to get a fire permit, which we are doing the right thing, the building would have been done about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So it's just the process we happen to go through at this point. It's out of our control a little bit, so we're going through it. I think you asked, so.
What about I'm assuming there's no fire inspection needed for the parking lot next door.
That I'm not aware of. I don't think so, but I'm not aware of one that is needed, but we'll follow up.
But where is that as far as the process goes?
We've got a drawing. We're ready to bring that to get permit. We're gonna have to get our permits for the fencing, because we're required to do all the things in commercial properties, and so we're right at that point with Frankie and I this week. Have had big discussions on that. Working on sprinkler systems, but we're ready to get that going just as soon as we can get Andrews turned on to doing the drainage. And once they do that and tie in our property across Bahia Villa to get to that, there's a catch basin there that goes out to the canal. Once they get that finished, that's a big domino effect. That's gonna turn everything loose after that.
Well, since we're on it, what about this area? Where's that RFP process at for?
That should go out this week. We wanna talk a little bit more about that as we get into the week. We've got everything ready to go for that. We felt like it would be the last week or the next last 2 weeks in March, which would give us, about a 30-day turnaround, but it's such a simple process that gives us time to get to the August deadline. So we feel like we're right there getting there. I think Jeff presented, I don't know if he did to BORCAB last meeting or not, but that's.
He talked about the
Yeah.
time, he talked about the timeline and everything. He didn't make a formal presentation,
Right,
but he
right.
gave an update on
And
it.
I think that's gonna be right here at the end. Not to change any, do you wanna talk a little bit about CRAs, the process?
You can start and I'll finish
I just
if you
did.
like. Oh,
Go ahead.
oh, that was smooth.
Set you right up.
Now, she did that, that's softball.
No, we've actually been getting some alerts. I think the Florida League of Cities sent out an alert, as well as the redevelopment agency that the Florida League staffs. There are 2 bills that are moving forward, and I think there's actually a committee meeting today on one of them. What it does is basically would eliminate the creation of a CRA after July 1st of 2025. It is a hard deadline at this time. The concern is that there had been discussion in the past about possibly creating a CRA in the town square area. And I think there was additional discussion about the need to get a study done, which is a requirement, a statutory requirement, and trying to get some feedback and information from the city of Fort Myers. So if you still want to move forward with possibly doing a CRA for Town Square, this is the time to do it in all due haste. The study itself can take quite a long time. So even if we embark in that process, we may not get the study done in time before the July deadline. And then it's not just doing the study and accepting it, but then there's ordinances and other documents that need to be approved and adopted subsequent to that. So we really do have a time crunch if you give direction to go ahead and proceed with all due haste to see if we can get that done. Because of the deadline, there's most likely going to be a high demand for consultants that can do this type of study. I did mention this to Sarah as well, and I don't know if you have any input on the availability of even getting a study done.
So I did have a conversation with Cordino. My group is not set up at this time to handle it that quickly. But I did have a conversation with Cordino, and they said if they can get the go-ahead, they can start it, and they think they can finish it in time. But it is a very tight timeline, and there are a couple of meetings that are required. So just figuring out if you want it, and then we'd have to pull the trigger quickly.
And just to add to that, I've reached out to the mayor of Fort Myers, Kevin Anderson. We've had a few discussions, and he would make his CRA director available to us to help us in any way moving forward, as far as questions and other things that we need to get our ducks in a row.
As the vice mayor likes to say, can we explain what a CRA is to those watching at home?
I guess from being up north, we call them TIF district. So it's just a specialized taxing district in that area. So whatever you do raise additional in that area stays in that area for redevelopment of that area.
CRA Community Redevelopment Agency,
Thank you, sir.
which they have to have a board, which typically you would serve as the board.
Right.
Could you go one step further? And
One
I'm,
step beyond.
I'm very familiar with TIF districts up north and how they work. Could you just make the case for a CRA for Times Square?
I think that whole redevelopment for that downtown district, I mean, that's like one of the major arteries to the town. So if you want blood, in this case, cash, using it as the blood going through that artery, and to help revitalize that area, not only through infrastructure, future infrastructure, and then how the layout or future layout of that area would look. That's what you want. You want that infusion to stay in a particular area.
So we're not just talking Times Square, we're talking the whole downtown district.
Yeah, right.
Yep, and just so people understand, it doesn't just capture what the town of Fort Myers Beach would pay, it captures all that tax revenue, correct? That would otherwise have gone to the county?
To some degree, there's portions of that tax that would be sustained here on the island.
So we would be capturing tax revenue that we wouldn't normally capture through the creation of the CRA, just so people can understand what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
you'd be capturing additional revenue, not so much the tax, but additional revenue that you could then use specifically for that.
That would
And
otherwise,
That's where the board has to stay in place.
that would otherwise have gone to Lee County.
Correct.
Yep, just want people to understand what we're talking
Well,
about.
and the caveat would be that the county has to approve it.
That is correct.
In speaking, when we first started talking about this, I reached out to the county commissioners to see how, at the time, it's changed, one of them has changed since then, but they wouldn't come out and say yes, but they didn't say no either. One of them actually made a suggestion that we look at what the county did with Bonita Springs. It wasn't considered a CRA, so to speak. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what he called it, but maybe we want to make a call to Bonita Springs and ask what that is, because he seemed much more favorable to go that route versus a CRA. I just would hate to put all the money and time and effort into something where the county's gonna tell us no.
But I also think that Mayor Anderson is like offering up his people.
Staff.
So that's a huge endorsement that Lee County is gonna stand with us on this, I believe. So I think,
Push as hard as we
yeah,
When it was presented, Lee County used the model that Fort Myers created as one to go forward and do. So at one time, they venerated it and said, hey, this is what you should build. If you're gonna do it, this is the way to do it. So that's kind of why we made the outreach to Mayor Anderson, and he was so gracious in allowing us to,
I mean, I think we should move forward. It's the entire downtown district. It goes from Bay to Beach and that whole area. And we need help there. We really do.
There was some talk about, why, at least some residents have reached out to me and said, why just one area? Why the entire island, right?
Well, that's another
But
thought
then
process.
you would need probably two. You need
You
one for
could create
midsection
two,
and then
correct,
one
and
for-
that's, it's all gonna be based on the study and the data that the study relies upon drawing certain conclusions, the statutory criteria that it's a blighted area that needs that infusion of money for infrastructure to redevelop it, bring it back. I just wanna emphasize that it's now or never, because of the hard deadline that the legislation has in it right now. Unless, of course, something happens in the legislature before the end of session, before that bill gets adopted, that would
If-
say at least the town or the city has started the process of creating a CRA. To give us a little bit more time, because it's really gonna be a Herculean, I can't even say the word, yeah, a task to get it done. I will tell you another jurisdiction that we work with, it's been over a year already, that they've been in the process of trying to get their CRA going. So,
So we need to get an
It'll be
ordinance,
tough.
an
We need
ordinance
to-
in place now. Do
excuse
we
me?
need to get an ordinance in place now? You're gonna have to codify it somehow. You can't just say we're doing it. You gotta have some
Right,
document.
right, we have to do that, but that's all based on the study. So the study is the first step, and getting the consultant to do that is
Well, do you need a
lightning speed.
resolution to give direction or
I think
Right,
we
something that
just,
we put in
to get a
motion.
study?
I
what do
think
we
it's
have to do
just
is-
direction.
I didn't know if we
that-
needed documentation to send to Tallahassee that we started this process pretty intently. I mean, we can call them and say, yeah, they told us to do this, but then that's again saying I didn't know I got my notice about the
But the
building being built.
legislation is saying the completion of the process, meaning
I
not only
understand, but
just
do
the
we need to
study,
put a
but-
stake in the ground that we've started it, that we
Oh,
are now
yes.
intently pursuing this and have direction from the council through resolution that this needs, that direction's
So
given?
perhaps, we can work with, Mr. Book, our lobbyist, and see if maybe, the town council would want to, request some type of extension, in the legislation to say that
Or
you have
exemption,
to
add
had
that to your
started the
list of
process,
discussion email, I just
Yeah.
started the process before July first, and then if you finish it afterwards, you're still okay having, that. So,
Well, I for one think we absolutely need to move forward on this. It's our last ditch effort and we're behind the eight ball and sometimes better work is done behind the eight ball.
Correct.
Unless you've seen me play pool.
And they call you eight ball.
Well,
So possibly, at your next meeting, I can work with the town manager and we can come back with a resolution regarding the legislation that you could advocate for or,
can we
yes.
have some kind of a subject matter expert testify at this next council meeting if we're gonna bring a resolution? Because it seems like we're just kind of spitballing here.
I can reach out and see if that person would be available.
Even if they can,
But I mean, if
Yeah,
we're gonna
that
hire
is-
this consultant, who I think is already doing our comp plan, who I think we've had a lot of challenges with, just my personal opinion with, I'd wanna know, A, how much that's just gonna cost, B, can we get the deadline? If we bookmark it, you know, if that's fine, I think that's a good concept, but if we can't, and we're gonna spend all this money on this consultant, who seems to take a long time already,
Right.
if we're not gonna make it, spend that kind of money.
Or
plus
is
I-
there a different consultant?
Yeah, or a different consultant. I think that's certainly worth looking for. I know they're probably popular right now. But I just don't think we've had somebody come and make the case for a CRA. I'm not saying a case can't be made, but we haven't had somebody come before the council who's a subject matter expert and said, here's the case for Fort Myers Beach, and here's why this is a great idea.
I don't know if you're gonna get the person from Fort Myers to come down here and make a case for
Yep.
Fort Myers Beach. That would have to be a case based on the study the end
Yep.
results. But I think you can get a subject matter expert to come here and at least express why the relevance of going for this at this time in such a fast manner would be vital to the town. I think we could get that person to at least say that and
Yeah.
explain in detail exactly what the CRA would be capturing, or whatever hybrid would be if it wouldn't be a CRA. But at least they could talk. So I will reach out to the city of Benita Springs, and I will also reach out to the city of Fort
Because it
Myers.
sounds like potentially, based upon what the mayor just said, there may be a hybrid somewhere here in terms of what Benita Spring, where we don't need the consultant, where we could keep the county happy and still derive the revenue we need.
Well, I think you're going to need to get this moving, and get a proper district set up, you're going to need the consultant somewhere. because they're the only ones that can actually make the case for Fort Myers Beach.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
and I think that's in lies the urgency.
Well, I think that it's more or less just what the benefits are of having one here, not make the case for us, but
Sure.
they're subject matter expert, they do it every day. If they could at least get on the video screen and say, guys, this is what,
Yes.
this is the benefit Fort Myers
Yeah,
has.
here's
This is
how
the
Fort
benefit
Myers
we,
benefit- yeah.
this is the process we did, not make our case, but that through making
I think that
their
would be
examples
helpful,
makes
yeah.
our case.
That would be helpful.
And I'm not sure I'd go that a consultant is necessary if the banana option is something that's viable.
We'll dig into it right away.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I don't remember what the name of it was, but Arlene, I'm sure, would be able to help you out.
Yep. Just another thing, Vice Mayor, we checked with LCSO, Riley did, 9 to 11:30 is what they needed. It probably could be cleared up
That's what I'm
earlier,
looking
but 9 to
for.
11:30 is the closure.
I would
It's
just,
going out now.
yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
I'll second. You want opposed?